Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate. And it's important to start by reminding us all that this whole process was only secured in the teeth of opposition from the government. So I start by paying tribute to those MPs who voted with us for Parliament to have a full democratic role in the Brexit process, and especially, therefore, to the member for Beaconsfield for the work that he did in the earlier debates. Labour has been absolutely clear from the start. Absolutely clear from the start, Mr. Speaker, there must be a meaningful vote on any negotiated deal. That was raised by my friend, the member for Holborn and St Pancras, at the very beginning of this whole Brexit process. And that should a deal be defeated in Parliament, as it was decisively, then Parliament must have a say on how the government proceeds. This is a vital issue that affects the future direction of our country and the futures facing all of our constituents. It determines the jobs and living standards of our people, the rights of European Union citizens living in Britain who have been deeply stressed by this situation, as have British citizens living across the continent of Europe. Our place in the world and our participation and cooperation in European-wide projects on issues as vital as security, counter-terrorism and climate change. Our job, Mr. Speaker, must be to bring people together. No matter how anyone in this House campaigned in the referendum, Mr. Speaker, no matter how anyone campaigned in the referendum, we cannot wish away the votes of 17 million people who voted to leave any more than we can ignore the concerns of 16 million who voted to remain. We must have in our minds the views right across the country. It is, Mr. Speaker, therefore right that members of this House represent their constituents to decide the way forward in implementing the results of the referendum. But in delivering the result, we have to unite. We have to unite people, not to create further divisions or to stoke xenophobia or to allow racism to rear its ugly head within our society. Mr. Speaker, many communities across this country have been neglected for far too long, lacking decent investment with too few.
Order. The person who has the floor chooses whether, and if so when, to give way. That's the situation. It's very clear, and it cannot be contradicted. That's all there is to it. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, what I was saying was, I will give way later on to a small number of people because I want this. Listen, the reasons this debate is so short is because the government decided to take an hour out of it to make a statement that could have been made on any other day. Not to mention the delay in the vote on December the 11th, which has run down the clock still further. Mr. Speaker, what I was saying was many communities across this country have been neglected for far too long, lacking decent investment, too few secure and well-paid jobs, too little new industrial development. These, Mr. Speaker, are not issues that face Britain alone, but they would be recognisable in communities all across Europe where many people face exactly the same problems. And so,
I'm very grateful. Contradictory, confused or claptrap? Which of those C's best suits the description of the right honourable gentleman's policy at the current time?
Mr. Speaker, this is a serious debate, and I don't think the honourable member's intervention has done anything to raise the standard of debate. Mr. Speaker, it's quite clear to me it's quite clear to me that the first duty we have is to block a disastrous no deal. And I hope that amendments to that effect will indeed be carried by the House later this evening. Labour's amendment, which stands in my name and those of my colleagues, starts, Mr. Speaker, by calling for sufficient time for Parliament to vote on options that prevent leaving with no deal. But whatever happens in the votes that follow, it has now become inevitable that the government will have to extend Article 50 in any scenario. If amendments intended to rule out no deal are defeated, and if this government is serious about keeping the threat of no deal on the table, then it's not even close to being prepared, and the exit date would have to be extended. And even if the Prime Minister's deal were to somehow achieve a majority in this House next month, there is no chance that the necessary legislation, primary legislation, and an extensive category of secondary legislation, I believe there are over 600 statutory instruments, could clear this place between now and the 29th of March.
Mr. Speaker, I can see that I'm very, very well liked here. Would my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, agree that clear, close and collaborative, that is the relationship which his amendment is proposing, and that is why we need a customs union, which is exactly what the unions, which Labour members and others are telling us, that we need a customs union with our neighbours.
I thank my friend for that intervention, and of course he's right. If we're to protect jobs and industries, maintain living standards, then of course there has to be a customs union. But as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, there are...
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. He's just reiterated, as his motion references, the need for a customs union. Will he now tell this House whether he means accepting the common commercial policy, accepting the common external tariff, accepting the union customs code? It's no use asking the Shadow Secretary of State, and accepting the EU state aid law rules.
Obviously, Mr. Speaker, a customs union would be negotiated, would be inclusive, and would be designed to ensure that our jobs are protected, our investment is protected, and there is frictionless and seamless trade between the European Union, and we would have a say in future trade arrangements, something the Prime Minister has absolutely failed to achieve. The fault, Mr. Speaker, for not achieving it lies absolutely with the Prime Minister. She claimed she would have a deal agreed by October, then delayed that by 1 month, and still suffered the worst...
Order. The former Foreign Secretary doesn't seem to be very well versed in the traditions of the House of Commons and debate... Order! I'm telling the right honourable gentleman what the position is, and he will learn from me. When he seeks to intervene, he waits to hear whether the person on his or her feet is giving way. The Leader of the Opposition is not giving way, in which case, with the very greatest of respect, it's for the right honourable gentleman to know his place, which is in his seat. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fault lies exclusively with the Prime Minister, who missed her own deadline to have a deal agreed by October. And she still suffered the worst defeat of any government in British history.
Can I thank my right honourable friend? Listen, I'm not sure how people in this House believe this will be received by the public watching TV. But I've got to say, the public are sick of the childish antics of people in this House. They want us to come together and find a way through this mess. Now, there are thousands of different views and variations of what people felt and thought they voted for in that referendum. But the one thing that we can be certain of is that the referendum leaflet that went to every household in this country didn't make a single mention of leaving the customs union. Why can't we find agreement on that?
I thank my friend for his intervention, and I think the point he makes about the way in which this House debates these matters is actually important. He's somebody that led a local authority, Oldham, brought people together, brought communities together and achieved things, something this government has lamentably failed to do. And if the Prime...
Order. Point of order, Mr. Michael Fabricant.
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman opposite may have inadvertently misled the House. He claimed that no one had said during the EU referendum that we would be leaving the customs union. In fact, the former Prime Minister said that...
Order. Resume your seat, Mr. Fabricant. I know you're trying to help the House, and I appreciate that. Your public spiritedness is well known throughout the House and across the nation. The honourable gentleman referred to a leaflet, the contents thereof. Whatever the merits or demerits of that argument, it is not a matter of order for the chair. It's a matter of political debate, as the grinning countenance of the honourable gentleman suggests he himself is well aware. Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just ask, is the Prime Minister...
Order. I hope it's a genuine point of order. Point of order, Rebecca Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's actually an observation, really, but it does seem that...
Order. Resume your seat. Resume at your seat. No. Order. With no disrespect to... Order. With no disrespect to the... With no disrespect to the honourable lady, I'm not interested in observations. Order. I'm not debating it. I'm telling her what the situation... No, it's no good laughing, chuckling away as though it's a matter of great amusement. It's a matter of fact. Points of order, yes. Observations, no. No, the honourable lady has helpfully explained that she had an observation to make. We're very grateful. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
A point of order. The honourable gentleman does know parliamentary procedure. Point of order, Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Speaker, this is a genuine point of order. I wonder if you could guide the House in how members refuse interventions, because I think the reason there is so much noise is it's not clear whether the right honourable gentleman has heard the intervention or not. And your guidance, I think, would be extraordinarily helpful.
Order. I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. If I understand his point of order correctly, the answer to it is that the customary method of acknowledging the intention of another member to intervene and perhaps the acceptance of that intervention is a gesticulation with the hand, at which, amongst other things, the honourable gentleman excels. No. I think the honourable lady is a bit confused. It's not the fact that somebody seeking to intervene gesticulates. It is the fact that the member on his or her feet signals acceptance. That hasn't happened, and therefore the Leader of the Opposition has the floor. The position is extraordinarily straightforward. Point of order. Point of order, Angela Smith.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I do wonder, with all the noise in the chamber, whether or not being directly behind the Leader of the Opposition, my request for an intervention may not have been heard.
Well, I can't claim to have known that, but I think now the honourable lady has issued what might be called a public information notice, and we're aware of it, but it is a matter for the Leader of the Opposition to decide. I hope the honourable lady is satisfied with her efforts. Jeremy Corbyn. Further to the point of order, order, calm down. I gave a ruling in relation to the point of order. Further to that point of order doesn't arise. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, is the Prime Minister seriously telling this House that we have to wait until the 13th of February and put her faith and put... Mr. Speaker, I can well understand what the Tory MPs are trying to do here. They don't want to hear the debate. They don't want to be part of this debate. They merely don't...
Order. Many people have talked in recent times about the importance of respect in the chamber. No, I don't require any help from the Government Chief Whip. Let me very gently say to the Government Chief Whip, He has a challenging task, which he discharges to the best of his capabilities, and the House and the nation are grateful to him. The idea that he needs to advise the Leader of the Opposition or the Speaker on how to discharge their responsibilities is frankly beyond credulity. He's got one job to do. People will make their assessment of whether and how well he does it. Don't try doing somebody else's job. With respect, sir, it's way beyond you. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker,
Dean Dorries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it in accordance with the rules of this House that the Leader of the Opposition only takes interventions from male members of his party?
The answer is there's no breach of rules whatsoever. The Honourable Lady's made her own point in her own way, and I acknowledge it. No breach of rules has taken place. Order has been maintained. That's clear to me, and it's clear to the professional advisers to the chair as well. And I think the Honourable Lady knows it, but she's made her own point in her own inimitable way. Jeremy Corbyn.
I did take an intervention from the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. Maybe the member hadn't noticed that. Is the Prime Minister seriously telling the House to wait until February the 13th and put their faith in her doing negotiations in a couple of weeks that she's failed to do over the past 2 years? And one really wonders how many more ceremonial baubles, promises of ermine will be handed out in vain in an attempt to cajole Conservative MPs to vote for a deal that has been overwhelmingly rejected by this House. The Prime Minister says a second referendum would be like asking the public to vote again until they give the right answer. But so far, that is precisely what she's asking this House to do. Mr. Speaker, Labour will today back amendments that attempt to rule out this government's reckless option of allowing the UK to crash out without a deal. Everyone bar the Prime Minister accepts that this would be disastrous. The CBI says that, and I quote, the projected impact of no deal on the UK economy would be devastating. Just yesterday, the Federation of Small Businesses called on members of this House to block no deal. And the TUC, representing millions of workers, is opposed to no deal, as its General Secretary, Francis O'Grady, discussed with me last week. Every opposition party in this House is opposed to no deal. Many members opposite, even frontbench and cabinet members opposite, are opposed to no deal. Let me quote the Chancellor, who said recently, "I clearly do not believe that making a choice to leave without a deal would be a responsible thing to do. So presumably he too wants no deal ruled out." Mr. Speaker, I'm making progress. Mr. Speaker, I'm making progress. Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary has gone further and called for a free vote on the amendment tabled by my right honourable friend, the member for Normanton, Pontefract and Castleford. The Labour Party will back that amendment tonight because to crash out without a deal would be deeply damaging for industry and economy. That's why the Chancellor says it would be irresponsible. I say to my right honourable friend now that in backing her amendment, we are backing a short window of 3 months to allow time for renegotiation.
Mr. Speaker, I do want to address the point that my right honourable friend has raised about my amendment, and I don't want to cut across what I know is a very difficult wider issue here. So just on this point about the amendment, can I reassure my right honourable friend that the purpose of the amendment and the bill is not to fix any particular time for any extension, or even to decide now what an extension of Article 50 should be. It is actually simply to give the House the ability to do so at the end of February, and I agree that nobody wants to see any unnecessary delays.
I thank my friend for that, for those remarks and the spirit with which she's made them. And quite clearly, her amendment does have the effect of ruling out no deal on the 29th of March. And that surely is something that should be good and important to this House. Because it will not be any comfort after the 29th of March to say, I told you so, when the lorries are backing up on the M20, when cancer patients can't get medicines, and when prices are rising in our shops. So tonight, Mr. Speaker, we have the opportunity to take no deal off the table. And, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister invited party leaders for talks, I said to the Prime Minister she must first remove the threat of no deal. If the House today votes to remove the immediate threat of crashing out without a deal on the 29th of March, as I fervently hope it does and will, then I will be happy to meet the Prime Minister to discuss a sensible solution that works for the whole country, which is what the Labour Party wants to achieve. Many of the amendments tabled, Mr. Speaker, including those in the names of my friends, the member for Leeds West and for Birmingham Erdington, and the member for Meriden, advocate delaying Article 50 to give Parliament more time to break the impasse and avoid the dangers of no deal. If this House votes for any of those amendments, then the Prime Minister must accept that an extension to Article 50 is a responsible measure to allow time for real renegotiation and find a deal that can win the support of this House. It will mean no deal is off the table, and it will mean the red lines must change. The primary part, I'm making progress if I may, the primary part of Labour's amendment tonight is about finding a workable solution. That means a new customs union. It means a strong single market deal. And it means, Mr. Speaker, no race to the bottom. No race to the bottom on workers' rights, on environmental protections and standards, or on consumer standards. The EU chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been clear, and I quote, unanimously, the European Council have always said that if the UK chooses to shift its red lines in the future and go beyond a simple free trade agreement, then the EU will be immediately ready to give a favourable response. And we understand that just this weekend, the EU Commission President told the Prime Minister that accepting the case for a permanent customs union would help to solve the issue of the backstop arrangement. Indeed, Ireland's Europe Minister made exactly this point at the weekend, saying that the backstop is there because of the red lines put down by the UK at the beginning of this process. Today, Mr. Speaker, we understand the government is backing the amendment in the name of the Right Honourable Member for Altrincham and Sale West. The Prime Minister said as much, requiring changes to the backstop. But still, we have no clarity on what changes they are or which red lines will change to allow that to happen. On the other side, we see that there is flexibility and apparent willingness now to renegotiate, but only if the red lines change.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way on that point, and does he share my puzzlement after listening to the Prime Minister for well close to an hour and after many people ask this question, that we are still no nearer any detail on what the phrase alternative arrangements means, except that the Prime Minister said they were arrangements that were alternative.
I thank my friend for that intervention. In reality, Mr. Speaker, we're witnessing this long, slow decline of this government as they run down the clock on this. They put off the vote. They lost the vote. They came today and are now offering more votes next week, week later, running down the clock of the fear of no deal as opposed to her deal. So when her deal was defeated 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister is still to answer the question as to which of her red lines she's prepared to change or even just be flexible on. So it is clear, Mr. Speaker, the obstacle to a solution is the Prime Minister. She's refusing to accept the clearly stated will of this House, which has decisively, in parliamentary record vote numbers, defeated her deal, and is equally clear in its opposition to a disastrous no deal, which I hope and expect will be reiterated tonight. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to make progress. Mr. Speaker, in the absence of any leadership from the Prime Minister, then solutions are being put forward across this House. There are those advocating Norway Plus or a Common Market 2.0 have worked on a cross-party basis, and I pay tribute to the members for Grantham and Stamford, Harlow, Aberavon and Manchester Central. They are clear that not only do we need full access to the single market, but a customs union too. That is why a new, comprehensive and permanent customs union has long been Labour's policy. It is a pragmatic solution that helps to deliver the Brexit that people voted for, to deliver the frictionless trade that the Prime Minister once promised, that helps to deliver a solution to the Irish backstop, and that helps to deliver a majority across the House for a deal. So far, the Prime Minister has, Mr. Speaker, only doubled down on her own defeated deal, saying last week at Prime Minister's question time that her deal delivers, and I quote, the benefit of customs union and the benefits of our own trade policy. It does no such thing. The political declaration fails to deliver on the Chequers' promise of frictionless trade. It does not even guarantee tariff-free trade. It means we lose 40 to 50 trade agreements we have through the EU. Yes?
Can I ask the right honourable gentleman, why is he scared to take an intervention from the member for Penistone and Stockbridge, a member of the Labour Party for 37 years?
I thank the Minister for his intervention and his brief statement of his leadership intentions. So as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, I'm making progress.
Order. Is the right honourable gentleman giving way? Yes. No, he's not giving way. No. Order. The House must behave with decorum. Senior members of the front bench, who I know would proclaim their commitment to, and I'm sure genuinely believe in courtesy in the chamber, are witness to deliberate attempts to shout the leader of the opposition down. Order! It will not happen. Order! The rules of this House are clear. If the Leader of the Opposition wishes to give way, he does so. If he doesn't wish to do so, he doesn't have to do so. He will not be shouted down, and no amount of inspired and orchestrated attempt to shout him down will work. Not today, not tomorrow, not at any time. Drop it. It isn't worth it. And actually, you're not very good at it. Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, I'm making progress, Mr. Speaker.
Field.
Mr. Speaker, there may be quite a few people in the country watching this debate.
Yeah.
they won't understand that our shouting is one way of seeing whether somebody can maintain a line of argument to his and her colleagues here. Given the damage this debate is already doing to our standing with the nation, might not he consider taking all the amendments he didn't call, closing the proceedings early so we could actually give votes which the country will understand, whereas they don't understand this behaviour?
Well, I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman. I know he's well-intentioned, but the short answer is no. The timescale for the debate has been set and agreed by the House. The selection by the Chair has been appropriately made in accordance with the conventions of this House and without demur from colleagues, and it is best that we proceed. Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, I'm coming towards the end of my remarks because I want to ensure that other members get a chance to speak in this debate.
Simon Hoare, we'll see. A point of order or a real point of order, but we'll see. Mr. Simon Hoare.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful. You've rightly referred earlier in this debate to the expectations in this place of respect and politeness to colleagues. That is a perfectly sensible benchmark to set. In your judgment, sir, and I seek your ruling on this, has the behaviour of the Leader of the Opposition to his honourable friend lived up to your expectations of respect with colleagues?
The answer is very simple. Good order has been preserved, nothing disorderly has taken place, and I don't want to be unkind to the honourable gentleman because I know he's trying to be an apprentice parliamentary expert, but he's got quite a few steps on the ladder still to climb, I'm afraid. Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point I was making that this could mean we lose 40 to 50 trade agreements we have through the European Union and to which the International Trade Secretary has so far failed to replicate at all, despite the extraordinary and very bold claims he made at the beginning of this whole Brexit process. Mr. Speaker, this is a government in denial, split from top to bottom and incapable of uniting themselves, let alone the country. No, I'm making progress. I'm not going to give way anymore. They are in denial. Mr. Speaker, they are in denial about the majority view of this House that I believe exists to rule out no deal and to get a workable deal that includes a customs union. That's why Labour will tonight back amendments that give this House the opportunity to recognise the reality that this government has so far failed to do. This government's shambolic handling of Brexit negotiations is fast becoming a crisis. It's worrying to businesses. It's worrying to people in work about their own future. And everyone who is worried because they have no leadership on this process from their government. No leadership from a government that has demonstrated it has no ability to negotiate a good deal, no willingness to listen to Parliament, hence we're back here again despite the biggest ever defeat in parliamentary history, and crucially, Mr. Speaker, no acceptance that they must change course. They spent most of the last 2 years arguing amongst themselves rather than negotiating with the European Union. And still, Mr. Speaker, they're arguing amongst themselves and failing to come up with a workable solution. Tonight, Mr. Speaker, I hope this House does its job and leads where this government has failed.
Mr. Kenneth Clark.